If you're like the other painting companies that I talk to, you've probably had the feeling of I just wish there was a software that, you know, solved the problems that I encounter on a day-to-day basis. And I hear this all the time. I just wish there was a software. I just wish there was a software. And what I've come to realize is that, first of all, there are softwares that are called all-in-ones, and there are these tools that exist that are attempting to solve all of the problems that happen inside of a painting company or a contractor company. And there are many of them. You can look up like all-in-one contractor software, all-in-one painting software, whatever. All of those systems or all of the softwares that exist are good, and they have pros and cons, just like every other software that you're going to consider for your tech stack. But the thing that you need to understand about all-in-ones is that in order to deliver that service to you, they have to make a bunch of assumptions on how you're going to want to run your business. So they're going to have limitations on how you can do quoting. They're going to have limitations on what an estimate is, or when you can schedule an estimate, or how that works, or they're going to have restrictions around the scheduling of sold jobs. So all of those things are going to be built in such a way that the software company that made that thinks is the most effective way to run a contracting business. So it's important to understand that when you're starting out, the all-in-one is a fantastic option because it just puts systems in place and it builds things around processes that you didn't even know existed or that you didn't even know that you needed. So I love all-in-ones for small companies. I would say startup all the way to maybe $2 million is where all-in-ones thrive. That's why there's so many businesses in that space, which is why there's a lot of tools out there. Jobber, Job Nimbus, Drip Jobs, all these. There's Contractor Foreman, there's Job Tread. Like there's literally dozens and dozens of all-in-one contracting softwares. Now, the cons of that are that if you don't want to do that particular part of your business the way that they've built it, you're kind of out of luck. So I always tell people that having more softwares in your business is not actually a good thing, because you can think of each software as like a tool or a car that someone has to drive. And if you only have one driver, which is you don't want to have 4 or 5 cars to drive, and those would be 4 or 5 different softwares, because you don't have the time to drive those cars. However, if you get a rock star marketing manager when you're a $5 or $7 million painting company, that marketing manager is going to want the sweet, awesome, fast, and agile marketing car to drive around so it can win races in the marketing world. So that type of thinking, I think, is really important. And those are the pros and cons of all-in-one software. Now, I want to go through outside of all-in-ones. I want to talk about the 5 most common pitfalls that we see when it comes to selecting software in a business. So, like I said, if you're under $2 million, you're probably like either already using an all-in-one or you're considering whether or not you should. And that's great. When you step out of that frame and you go to you set your sights higher on a larger revenue target, or maybe you're already past it, what I want to talk about is the 5 common things that I see businesses fall into when they're selecting softwares. So the first thing is optimizing something that shouldn't exist in the first place. So very often you have companies that they've built out Google Sheets, or they've taken their estimating tool and they've tried to turn it into a CRM, or they take a CRM and they try and use it as project management, and they start optimizing and spending time building out this component of a software that was not intended to be used for that purpose in the first place. And they're spending all this time and energy trying to optimize this thing. And the reality is that, even I would say another example of this would be getting really efficient at extracting reports from the different tools and compiling it and making a really slick way of creating reports for your business. That entire process probably doesn't even need to exist if you had the right softwares in place. So by understanding that if you start with first principles, like I mentioned in the previous video, and define what is it that we're trying to do, you're going to have a lot more success when it comes to using the software and actually spending your energy on the right things if you are confident that you've picked the right softwares. The second thing is they don't make a plan for what it is that the software is supposed to do. At Boolean, we call this the data blueprint. So if you have ever built a house or put a shed together or done any sort of construction project, you know firsthand how valuable and critical it is to have a blueprint for what it is that you're going to be creating. Not making a data blueprint is the equivalent of beginning to build a house without blueprints. And what would end up happening if you zoom ahead in that construction project is you would finish the walls and you've got your subs coming in and there's drywall people happening. And then you go, to your dining room and there's no outlets or there's not a light fixture in the ceiling. And there's like, well, why didn't we have that? And the reality is because you never drew and made plans of where things needed to go before you started constructing. And I see that again and again is that people will just take the tool that's in front of them and then they add on another tool and then they add on another tool and they add on another tool. And they've never taken the time to thoughtfully decide what type of business am I building? And when I have that defined, what type of software does that business need to thrive? And work backwards to make your plan before you go choose what softwares you're going to use. The third common error is not setting up your softwares properly. So this is another huge mistake. And that is you buy this awesome project management system or you buy an amazing CRM that's basically a customizable blank canvas and you don't put in the right properties. So like it starts out with, oh, I just need a name, an address, a phone, an email. Turns out there's over 200 properties that are needed in your painting business to run and to take a project from lead status all the way through the system to job cost that to find out if you made money. There's 200 data fields and all of those data fields need to exist in different softwares in your tech stack. And if you don't set it up right the first time and you kind of are adding in fields as you go, you're going to find out that a lot of the integrations that you build and the automations that you make are either leaving out critical pieces of information or you're going to be reworking those automations constantly to try and get that data in there. So not setting up the tool properly, or how many of you can relate to knowing that you have a tool in your business that was really great or would have been great, but you just know that you're not taking full advantage of it. The fourth big pitfall is companies that migrate. So they decide, okay, we're going to migrate to this other system. It's a better tool. And they don't make a plan for the migration or they even test how we're going to migrate. When are we going to migrate? Who's going to own the migration? Who's mapping? What fields need to go where? And what ends up happening is the migration stretches for weeks or months. In fact, I talked to a company. It had been 9 months since they implemented or migrated their new system, and they still had people using the old CRM because they didn't trust the new system because not all the data had been migrated over and people weren't trained on it. And so now you have sales reps that some of them are updating info in old systems and some of them are updating info in the new systems, and you're trying to pull reports and you don't know which one is correct. That is super common, and it all stems back to you did not migrate properly and or even have a plan on how to migrate properly, and then you failed to sunset the old system and force people into that new system. So that's the fourth most common problem. And then the last one is not training the team well before implementation. This is probably what's one of the most important like human factors to consider for myself, like knowing myself and being self-aware. I love technology. I love change. I love improving technology. I love playing with the new features when there's a new iOS update. I love the new stuff that technology is providing, and I like playing around with it. Not everybody is like that though. And it's in the process of working with over 16 companies and helping them do this that we've realized at Boolean, this is a critical piece of the process that many companies miss, is that they don't have a proper training plan in place to get the new tech and the new systems in place that they need to succeed. So what I always tell people is that you need pre-training and post-training in order for the software to go effectively. And then you need to have check-ins to make sure that your team is actually using the software in the way that it was designed, and that you're verifying that the process that you trained them on day one is still being used on day 15 and day 30 and day 60 and so on. So not training your team, you might ask, well, that's obvious. Like clearly I'm going to train my team. But the problem is if you don't have your systems fully built when you roll out your new systems, you don't know what to train your team on because the system is going to evolve and change over time. So the worst thing that can happen is that you train your team on, version 1 of your tech stack. And then 2 weeks go by and you add in a new thing. And then the training has to happen again. And then 2 more weeks go by and you make adjustments because you realize that you missed a couple fields and we need to add some stuff in. And then you do another training. And what ends up happening is that the people that are trying to run your business and do the processes that you've identified, they get sick and tired of people changing this tech and the information on them. And they just want to know, how do I do my job? Let me get good at it and let me crush my role so that I can help you win. But when you're constantly changing things on them, or you're rolling out changes over time and your training on this new system gets drug out over 3 to 6 months, you can get to a point where people in your business are actively resisting implementing the new tech that is going to make your whole business thrive because they're just tired of learning new stuff. Like, nobody likes change. Nobody does. Some people might enjoy like the learning of new stuff, but if areas of your life were just constantly being changed and tweaked and modified, the majority of us would all hate that. So it's really important to understand, what is it that needs to be trained? Let's make a plan and make sure everybody knows what the end looks like. And then let's go execute and train and allow everyone to be successful and ultimately stop messing with the system so that people can get good at using the tools that you want them to. So those are the 5 most common pitfalls for people that are selecting tools outside of all-in-ones. Like I said at the beginning, when you select an all-in-one, you're avoiding a lot of the additional information that you even have to have conversations around, because so many of the decisions are made for you. But as you maybe have already experienced or will experience as you pass that $2 million threshold, the custom tools start to make a lot more sense than the all-in-ones that force you to do things a certain way. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.